Hello, Kent City Baptist Church. It is Wednesday, February 10th, and time for your pastoral devotional. This week, Pastor Chris asked us to meditate on the first of the Beatitudes in Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. You know, this first Beatitude is somewhat difficult to wrap our minds around. What exactly does it mean to be poor in spirit? As Pastor Chris said, it has a lot to do with humility, dependence on God, our devotion and trust in Him. But really, this beatitude, I think, is easier to see demonstrated than it is to be defined. I think of some examples in the Old Testament that exemplify what it truly means to be poor in spirit. The first example that comes to my mind is Abraham. Actually, Abraham and Lot. It's kind of a small, minor story in the story of Abraham. In Genesis 13, it tells us that Abraham and Lot were living together, Abraham the uncle and Lot his nephew. But their possessions had grown, their flocks and herds, so much that the land couldn't really sustain them. It was creating conflict. And so Abraham said, it's time for us to go our separate ways. But Abraham was poor in spirit. He gave two options to Lot. He says, you can go to the right or to the left, and I will go the opposite direction, and I'm going to give you the first choice. Abraham demonstrated his trust in God by not asserting his own rights and privileges as the older and the patriarch of the family. I think of David and Saul. Do you remember David? He was anointed to be the next king of Israel, but he had a problem. There was still a king of Israel. His name was Saul. Twice, Scripture tells us that David had an opportunity to take Saul's life and assume the kingship of Israel. And both times, David refused. He said, I'm going to trust God's timing to fulfill his promises to me, rather than to take someone else's life in my own hands. He was poor in spirit. I think of Daniel. Do you remember the story of Daniel in the lion's den? Daniel's practice was to pray every day, and his enemies said, you know what, this is the one place that we can trap him, in his devotion to his God and the practice of his faith. They had a law made that said, if anyone prays to anyone else but our king, they're going to be cast into a den of lions. Daniel had a choice. Would he trust God and practice his faith, or would he turn? Would he hide his devotion to God in order to protect himself? Daniel was poor in spirit. He humbly trusted God, even if it was going to be costly for him. You know, R.T. France, the commentator, has a great paraphrase of what this first beatitude says. He says it means that we are fortunate, or fortunate are those who humbly trust in God because they show themselves to be citizens of heaven. He says it is a good thing to trust in God, because in this way you demonstrate that you truly are a citizen of heaven. We live in a day and age where sometimes we want to demonstrate, or there's a temptation anyway, I'll put it that way, to say we're going to show our faith by winning, by accumulating celebrity endorsements. This person is famous, and they say that they're a Christian, they're an athlete, an entertainer. But the Beatitudes show a very different way. They say, you know what? How you show yourself to be a citizen of heaven? It's when you're poor in spirit, and God matters more to you than all that this world has to offer. We have choices each and every week, each and every month. We have choices sometimes of whether we're willing to scrap our integrity for financial gain. If we're poor in spirit, we value God over any other gain. We have choices and temptations, whether we're going to distrust God's timing in order to have what we want right now, whatever the cost. To be poor in spirit is to humbly depend and trust in God, and say, I trust His timing. We have temptation sometimes to hide the name of Christ, to not identify with him or to be known as a Christian, to alter our practice, to avoid maybe mockery or distrust from someone. But Jesus reminds us, fortunate are those who are humbly devoted to God. This is the true way that they demonstrate and show that they truly are citizens of heaven. You know, Jesus spoke those words to a group of Jewish Israelites in the first century who lived under an oppressive Roman government that really had its way with the people of Israel. And to these people, Jesus said, you know what? There is a kingdom in this world, and you can fight for power with it. Or you can show yourself to be citizen of a different kingdom by choosing a different path in a different way. You know, in some ways it doesn't seem very satisfying because, to be honest, I like to win. But you know what? The truth of the matter is, the Roman Empire is not here any longer. But the kingdom of heaven still stands. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Thanks for listening today, and I just pray that God would bless you and keep you as you follow him this week.